All right, hello YouTube. This is AAA here, along with my friend Duff. Welcome back to a new year. It's been a little while for some unforeseen circumstances, but we are back and here to talk about all of the stuff. So, Duff, go ahead and say hi.
Hey everybody.
So today we're here to talk about some craziness that's been going on. Of course, unfortunately, that was kind of all of last year. But this year, there's still more craziness, and as you can tell by the title, there's a lot of he said, she said, things could be happening, things might not be happening, and just a lot of allegations and guesswork, and not a lot of proof behind stuff. So, if you might have not been paying attention to the news recently, this or last week, then you might not know that there is still a lot of controversy over some things that our great president has been doing, and there was a government shutdown. There were plans to uh, get a different deal on the table between the right and the left about immigration reform and that kind of thing. Things could happen, things could not happen, but I kind of want to start, I guess, over at the shutdown area and discuss good, bad, ugly, all that kind of all those things, and say, as I understand it, shutdowns are not necessarily great, but at the same time, they are a weapon you can use. Personally, when we had the shutdown, I didn't know about it until halfway through, and then we had the government turn back on again. So I don't think it's as life or death as the news might tell me that it is. But again, that's, I guess, your own opinion. I don't think we didn't lose power. We got paid. Not a lot happened on my end to make me freak out, but maybe this teaches politicians that they should kind of come to the table more often, kind of thing. But anyway, shutdowns overall. Do you have any thoughts on that, there, Duff?
Um, it's actually, from my perspective, kind of interesting because in here in Canada, I don't think our government can shut down in the same way without a government actually losing power. So essentially, what happens in the States, from what I understand, is the ruling party puts forward a budget that's usually backed by the president, and the opposition can say, no, we won't vote on that. And then they have to make deals about how much longer they're going to keep the government session open. And if they can't make an agreement, then the government just goes away, and everything that is considered an essential service is still funded, and nothing about the legal infrastructure of the nation changes over that period of time. So essentially, we would just call that a government recess. So every summer, our government goes on hiatus for basically 3 months. And essentially, it's exactly like the shutdown in the States. So it leaves me wondering, it's like, so how is this considered a big deal when essentially all it's doing is saying, let's just let the system run on autopilot, and all those talking heads that we see on the news and who sit in the chair in the Senate and Congress just don't do anything and things run normally. So what's the big threat with the government shutdown in the States?
Well, I know that on some news sites here, they talked about, oh, well, hey, if the government shuts down, then people will lose their jobs, money. And I think there's even an article written, I want to say it was MSNBC, but it could be wrong, talking about an asteroid coming to Earth. And if the government shut down, we'll all die. But thank God the government came back on again, which was later learned that the asteroid was nowhere near Earth and things have been flying past recently. So that's not a huge deal. But
Well,
yeah, again, this is more of the, oh no, such party is bad. If they do things, then we'll again. Their opening line is, "If this doesn't happen my way, exactly how I want it to be, oh God, people will die."
well,
So that just seems to be the catchphrase overall and stuff.
the oddity with this whole thing, though, is
But
if you want to take a look at political systems, the fact that the country can keep running smoothly when neither house is sitting is a really good indication of robust social institutions that do their job. So it does seem to come down to just this idea that politicians are of the opinion that they are very important people. And if they're not sitting down, bad things are going to happen. And what makes that doubly ironic is, of course, I think it's in Texas, they only allow the government to sit once a year for something like 4 weeks. And between those sittings, everything else is just running as it should. So it seems like a really odd angle to play when what you're essentially trying to push through is an ultimatum over immigration. But the thing is, immigration and immigration policing would still be operating during the government shutdown because it's considered an essential service. So, how detached from reality are we that politicians are saying, like, this is life or death, that the world's going to end, and oh, NASA won't be able to shoot down the asteroid. Wait a second, NASA has no weapons to begin with. So I'm a little bit bamboozled as sort of an international observer.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the depth of, and then I like your point about how important are these positions and why are we giving them the, oh, hey, senator, congressman, president, whomever, you have godlike powers if you go away or I'm sorry, you're not doing your job for XYZ time period, then oh, hey, I can't live, I can't survive, I can't get food, water, shelter, all those things. And obviously we've I mean, I guess it's kind of built to the point where it's we don't want to, I guess, know the truth about, hey, we don't really need this stuff, and it's all kind of just smoke and mirrors, and we don't want to have to face the fact of, oh, hey, well, that was a thing we've all talked about, that was a big deal, maybe it's not, and just kind of fess up to that kind of stuff. But actually, you mentioned too, I guess, segueing to the other point I was going to make about the immigration deal, about how that stuff is running. I know that, or I've been hearing a lot of things about a deal that has been attempted by Republicans to kind of um, to be more agreeable with the Democrats, and the Democrats are just basically saying no to everything. Um, and it sounds like, honestly, the best thing to do is potentially say, end certain plans or processes that grant the speediness of immigration overall. Because I mean, firstly, I don't know how it works in Canada exactly, but I do know that it is a very long and tedious process in the States to get your citizenship. I don't know why. I don't know the whole process. I just know it can take like over. I think I've heard a case it took like 20 years for someone to get citizenship in the U.S. But anyway, I know that there was a few talking points of, hey, why don't we end chain migration, keep kids who were born here, make their parents potentially go away, and then keep some people that are not felons here, deport the felons, and then go through the wall. But I guess if you want to, Duff, if you could go through and I guess compare and contrast the U.S. and Canada's immigration plan, and just maybe your thoughts on the deal that was attempted.
Um, so as someone who's sitting outside of the States, um, I fall down on the side of the argument that countries should be in the business of enforcing their national borders and trying to the best of their abilities to make sure that people coming into their countries have been vetted and vetted thoroughly. And I would hope that holds true for Canada. And right now, on this side of the border, what we're facing is that as the Trump administration has started to talk more and more about immigration, a lot of illegal immigrants from the northern parts of the states have been trying to pass over our border. And if you think the Mexican border is not well policed, the Canadian border is even less so. And it would seem that the media here is trying to keep our looming migration crisis sort of under wraps. Lauren Southern actually got into a lot of trouble for talking about it and actually driving along the Canadian border and watching people walk over. And the question that I sort of ask is this essentially is, I can understand for someone who is born in a country to parents who are illegal immigrants, you would see yourself as American, and you really wouldn't want mom and dad to be sent elsewhere, even though they got there illegally. But at the same time, to say that a country has to allow parents to stay or has to allow children who are born in their country but are not their citizens to stay seems to be a little bit at odds with the notion of a people and a national character that is defined by the place where you are. So if you're just allowing people to hop the border, then you're not necessarily, let's say, maintaining the idea of what your national character should be, and that your citizenship has value that needs to be defended in order for it to be valuable at all. So when it comes to DACA, I feel for these people, and I feel for the people in Canada who are the sons and daughters of illegal immigrants. But at the same time, I would always advocate for more stringent policing of borders, more stringent policing of people who seem to be trying to abuse the system because they can't get into the country because they wouldn't meet the qualifications of the screening process. So it's one of those ones where, as a politician, do you want to bite the bullet and do something which is probably necessary but unpopular, or are you going to keep hedging your bets, which the Trump administration seems to be doing and the Democrats seem to be doing, because I don't really think they care about the dreamers either, because it's just not politically expedient to go one way or the other, but it is entirely politically catastrophic if you were to come down hard on either side as well. So I don't know, man. What are your thoughts there, AAA?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's not well, that was the one I don't remember if you heard this or not. That was the there was a congressman, and he talked about this was back in the days of, oh hey, Trump said these people are from blank all countries. I'm like, okay, cool. And then there was a debate over chain migration, and one of the Democratic senators talked about, well, we can't call it chain migration because that's just racist, and we had slaves that were in chains, and if when you say that phrase, they get very offended and blah blah. So we need to make sure that we need to keep things the same, and we can't be mean. And that was on the actually I was listening to Mr. Shapiro talk about that, and he was kind of like, dude, what? So I guess I mean, no, I kind of I see the point. I mean, I think maybe the best position or stance to take in my mind is, of course, if you've grown up here, then I feel for you. If your family was trying to leave a poverty-stricken and unhelpful, I guess, area and trying to do better, make a better lifestyle for themselves, then I mean, more power to you. And I'm glad you maybe made the best decision you could for your family. I think that the most equal thing is to say that um, potentially, well, I guess for the first major fix to this whole thing is we need to just change fundamentally the way that immigration works. I think that would be a just giant, that is the issue, as opposed to, okay, well, let's just make them stay here. I'm not against people getting to be citizens of the U.S. Obviously, that's great. They can have their own social security numbers. They can go and be taxed. They can go in and provide value to the country, because most of them want to do that anyway. Most of them are here to help their families and get jobs and better the U.S. Great. Let them do that. Let's try and realize that that's what a large majority want to do. At the same time, I don't. I think that the first people to go are people that have committed crimes and or have been deported already. So, because one of the big issues right now is the fact a lot of Democrats say, oh, well, they should all stay here, and the Republicans go, oh, well, we can at least get rid of the immigrants who have broken laws and who have been deported, and that kind of thing. And Democrats go, oh no, everyone. And you're like, why would I want to keep someone here who broke the law? They're not from the country, and they robbed, killed, whatever they did, and you want to keep them here? That sounds ridiculous. So I mean, I think the first, obviously, the nice thing to do would be to change the way immigration is. It would be great to just say overall, okay, if you've been brought over here, if your family was came over here illegally, then give them maybe, I don't know, a certain time period potentially to get cards, and if not, then get back. Because I mean, I guess I see both sides of get out but stay. So that does suck, but at the same time, they made a decision. And at the same time, you need to, with going along with changing the way immigration works, make the law, make that more secure, and try to educate people on, just those fixes. But I mean, I think those are the two. Just making that system better overall, and fixing the law is the best case. But like you said, there's no leeway, or there's no. Democrats are very much, here is my position, I'm going to stick with it, which sucks because then you don't get anything done. And I mean, well, I don't know. Do you think that Democrats, would you say it's fair to assume Democrats only want, or a large majority want them to just stay because they want the votes? Is that, do you think that's a fair guesswork, or is that maybe going too broad?
Well, it comes down to the idea of what's politically expedient at the time. And if you were to take, I think the number they said was 800,000 people
Yeah,
are
it's about
currently somewhat covered by what would be the DACA agreement if it was put forward. Well, that is a lot of people, but it's still less than a percentage point on the larger scale of things. So if you think of the US as a population of something like, I think, close to 380 million people.
oh, that went up then, damn.
Yeah, I might be a little off on that. But the thing is, that is basically a drop in the pond. So it is not as if this is going to cause a demographic shift that will somehow change traditional voting patterns. What it is a proxy which they can use to try and point out that, oh, the current administration is racist, uncaring, and unfeeling towards people from outside of the United States. And what's kind of terrible about that is, to a degree, you kind of want your government to preference your own citizens over people from other countries, especially if they're intentionally trying to break the law. And so they're throwing sophistry into the political realm in order to not necessarily gain anything in terms of votes, but to make sure that the spotlight of the media is where they want it, and on an issue which Trump unfortunately seems to waffle on a lot, because after the government shutdown, he didn't actually have to offer any type of concession. Basically, the Democrats pulled the trigger and found out nobody cared, and he could have left it at that. And I think Ben Shapiro points this out as well. I think he pointed it out, what was it, last Wednesday, where he's like, why on earth is Trump actually talking to the media and talking about things which he can and can't do, when if he just stayed quiet and sort of stayed the course, they probably could get a lot more? Because this doublespeak that Trump is engaging in essentially means that the Democrats don't lose anything by not coming to the table, because they know that Trump eagerly wants to get them there. So he's given away the bargaining chip which he had coming out of the government shutdown. But once again, in terms of the broader application of this policy and the broader, let's say, significance to society as a whole, I don't actually think there are enough people being falling under the auspices of DACA to actually make it a politically expedient thing beyond what it is, and keeping the media's eyes and attention where the Democrats, or at least some Democrats, want it.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I guess in that case, do you think that, I mean, we've all seen the, or okay, I should not say that. The posturing on the from the media from Trump and Schumer. I know, of course, I've seen a few videos where Chuck Schumer says, "Oh, well, you know, the government shut down. That's the Republicans' fault." From, I guess, interestingly enough, from your point of view, coming from an outsider, are you seeing, uh, if you're not as into what's going on here, do you think that it was a does it look like a win or a loss, I guess, on your end for the Democrats for the shutdown?
Well, the thing is, the Canadian press, by and large, is pretty much on the Democrat side of things. Um, our major news sources are somewhat globalist in their orientation, and so they would be trying to dress it up as this is a win for Democrats. But if I check the CBC website, this is already old news. They're not really paying attention to it. In fact, right now, what's catching a lot of Canadians' attention is some of the more underhanded things that Justin Trudeau has been doing with his Liberal majority, and some of the more social justice orientated policies that he's tweaking and adding and trying to get in through the back door into the Canadian Constitution itself. So for us, it's a kind of a non-issue. Leading into it, sure, we were like, oh my gosh, the Republicans are so bad, don't they care? But now that it's passed, it's a non-issue. And that's probably an indication of just how badly the Democratic Party, or at least the Democratic senators and the people in the Congress, handled the potential government shutdown. When Ted Cruz did it, I think it was 2.5 years ago, there actually seemed to be some weight and some strength and some resolve behind what he was doing, even though the Republicans didn't actually back him to the degree that they probably should have. Whereas this is kind of like, oh, they tried it. Maybe they tried it because they thought the Republicans managed to do it, but they didn't manage to get any concessions through their actions. Unfortunately, Trump, after the fact, decided, oh, well, we'll offer them concessions anyways. And it's just like, oh, maybe not wise.
That's fair enough. That's interesting. Actually, and since you just mentioned Trudeau and SJW tactics and stuff, have you seen the latest speech by Mr. Shapiro recently at the Yukon or Yukon or whatever it is?
Connecticut?
Yes,
University of Connecticut?
Like yeah.
I didn't actually watch that video. Can you tell me about it there, AAA?
Yeah, there was actually, and again, I don't know if you've seen, because I've seen, I think, uh, if not all, the vast majority of Mr. Shapiro's speeches at these college campuses, and the first, I think, geez, 5 of them are very much the same thing, and the questions and answers are really cool. This speech was not a carbon copy of the last one, but it was very similar, and he basically just, in the beginning of the speech, just said, "I'm going to tell you facts. These aren't opinions. These are facts. You might be offended by them, but these are not opinions. These are the facts. I will read them off where I got them from and what I think about them. I will tell you when they're my opinions, but just let you know, you might be offended by these words. I'm not meaning to offend you. I'm just trying to inform you of what is going on in the world." And he just had a whole 10 minutes spiel on preparing, yourself for that. And he went on over, and it was basically just his similar speech, but just saying, okay, here are the facts. And at the end of that, he said, okay, given all these facts, here are my opinions. Here's why these facts exist, and here are ways to solve the problems. These are my opinions here. And then the only way that I will listen to you in a good argument is to say that you may disagree with where I got the fact or you might disagree with my opinion. But if you disagree with me, you must say, I don't agree with the fact in this specific case because of example XYZ. If you just say no, if you just say, I don't like you or you make me feel bad, then I won't talk to you. And it was very good about uh, going and trying to decipher the making good arguments and that kind of thing. So it was awesome to see blatantly clear, hey, he's not going to deal with your crap. And then there were a lot of Q&A, which was pretty good, and a few, because if you've seen any of his speeches, they were, hey, if you disagree with me, come to the front. A few good talking points on that, and a few good questions about, like, hey, here's the issue with XYZ culture or race. How do you fix that kind of stuff? So anyway, I can go on and on, but if you haven't seen that, I definitely would recommend seeing that speech that he gave and the Q&A he did, which was pretty good. So you should definitely see that, and I mean, hopefully he does. I hope he does styles like that more often stuff. So it was pretty cool.
Well, what I'd say to that, there, AAA, is it seems that in the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of appeals for sanity, and also trying to create space for open discourse where you actually deal with the other person is saying. So earlier last week, Jordan Peterson actually sat down with a British news anchor named Kathy Newman.
I did hear about that, yeah.
Who basically systematically tried to make him look bad. Everything was essentially an ad hominem. Everything was a straw man. And Jordan Peterson managed to sit through it. And where he sort of struck back was his discussion of, if you want to have a society where you can actually understand one another, you have to allow offense. Because if you don't allow people to say something which is offensive, how on earth are you going to find out what the other person is thinking? And so therefore, it's like when you, as you say, Ben Shapiro is talking about laying the grounds for how do we actually talk about things? How do we actually come to a reasonable understanding and a consensus of we are talking to one another, not at one another, and we are talking within the realm of information that we can find that is accessible and that has not been manipulated in some sort of way. That's really seems to be a theme that's been in the media, that's been in the online sphere over the last 2 weeks. And I think that's a good thing. If we can get rationality on some level to be part of the prevailing discourse again, I think we will see great things in 2018. Do I expect that to happen? Probably not. But it's interesting that so many, I guess we could call them conservative pundits right now, are trying to address that particular topic in the face of uh, a lot of criticism, but a lot of criticism that is really disjointed and that doesn't necessarily try and tie itself to any basis in reality.
That's yeah, that's very well said. And speaking of no basis in reality, did you see any of the news regarding the Women's March of this year?
I actually didn't follow that too much. I had a colleague who was actually in LA, and what he said was really confusing, very much like the previous year's Women's March, is there's so many groups represented there that you can't really get an overarching feel of just what they're advocating about, because one group might be advocating for entirely the opposite of another group. So it becomes not necessarily a march for a particular women's issue, but rather a march for grievances that even the members of the marching community can't sit down with one another to talk about. And so you kind of wonder, it's like, besides the PR which you're getting, how are you furthering the intellectual and let's say real world applicable discourse of whatever you're trying to do? But what are your thoughts there, Triple A?
Well, I think that's I would have. It seems as though the last time this happened, when during the inauguration of Trump, at least there was a semi okay, hey, we're against the sexism, and we're against Trump, we're against all of his comments and all of his opinions and laws that we think he's going to make with women and another races and kind of deal. And so there was a quasi goal or point in mind, and it was just we don't like him, so at least I'll give him the fact that they tried to have a goal set and say, okay, hey, we don't want a man to mess with us, we are independent and blah blah blah. So there was something there, and I agree. I saw Fleckus Talks. I saw him on the Ben Shapiro show and the Michael Knowles show, and then I saw what's his face, Nuance Bro, and there's one other guy that was there that I can't remember the name of, but they basically walked around and said, hey, what's going on. And I agree. Several interviewers that or several people that they talked to just described, oh hey, I'm here for I'm very much looking forward to the impeachment of Trump, and I'm looking forward to the end of the white man and all this kind of stuff. And so it was generally the against Trump stuff, but it was just such a wide yeah, I agree, it was a wider complaint list, from pay and treatment of women and rape allegations and the like women's rights and stuff. And so it was a lot of random complaining for a while and nothing, which was weird to say because too, even the name Women's March, I mean, there were plenty of guys there that, I mean, kind of had the same thing. It was more of a leftist um community complaint list, I guess, is a better leftist complaining is probably more accurate description, because I don't think they were much fewer people were there for women's rights than they were there for the specific uh, laws or changes that were half of them were already made anyway, that they were kind of had grievances over, as you said. So it was more of a waste of time than last year, which was kind of hard to pull off, but they somehow managed to make it more useless PR and stuff. But no, it just and who knows? I mean, I take it that in 2019, the same thing will happen on the inauguration day. They'll say, "Oh, hey, we have more issues with the current government and blah blah blah," and that kind of thing. So I don't think that will get fixed. And actually, to your point there about people disagreeing over one another about what their goals were, do you think that we're closer to the point where the left is so they don't have goals within themselves, that they're just going to kind of implode, if you will?
Um, no, I think the idea that the left or the right, because both sides would see the ideal situation as being the other side disappearing, imploding, and eating itself. And that's not the way these things work. I think what we're going to see is the gradual bringing to light of some of the nothing burger that is currently the leftist ideology surrounding gender, intersectionalism, and just what we as a society should be orientating ourselves towards. When you look at a lot of leftist thinkers from the past, from Sartre to Lukács and others, they often propose a type of nihilism which ends in nothing. You're not actually trying to build any towards something tangible that sits in reality, but rather towards a utopian ideal which continuously renews itself, because utopia can never be achieved, but that's the point. So you can always rabble rouse. And so what we'll see, as always, is a shift towards things that they think the right, or even people in the center, aren't able or haven't thought about enough to try and counter. So it's kind of like each side is symbiotically related to the other, and sometimes one side becomes more dominant than the other. And in popular discourse and in the media and in the university, well, leftist thinking is very much more popular. But we're seeing a counter movement on the political right and the political center that's pushing back against that. But it's going to create new things and new arguments for people to deal with. So do I see the left eating itself? Well, I see some groups of them disappearing, and they're going to be taken up by other groups, because it's always an intellectual purity test. But do I see grounds to be optimistic because of the people who are speaking, to borrow a leftist phrase, truth to reality, like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and others? Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of optimism, because the left is kind of running out of arguments within their current sphere. And that's going to force them to change. And that might be a good thing. And we'll see what the rebuttal is when the right, let's say, gets power, and then suddenly the left starts pushing back and this process repeats itself. So I don't really know there, AAA.
Interesting. That's so are you saying that so you're basically saying there that the left is running out of complaints? Is that just a fair statement?
I'm saying in terms of the current formulation, proponents of, let's say, centrism, or let's say conservatism, currently have some really good arguments for taking apart leftist positions, which is forcing the left to either double down on its ideology or shift more to the extremes. That will change eventually, but right now, as I say, there seems to be basis for optimism, even though the outrage of the left seems to get way more playtime in the media.
Interesting, gotcha. Well, yeah, I agree. I hope that eventually, I mean, as we kind of discussed before, back in the day, it was very, very scary, and you couldn't discuss your personal life with anyone else, or else you would be judged and even, injured, or just be detrimental overall to your image if you said, "Oh, hey, I am sexually oriented this way, or this is my religion," that kind of thing. And so now we've been fighting for, hey, just leave me alone. And now we're to the point where we're trying to make the whole "I am different than everyone else" a cool thing, which is fine. And then we've, as you said, gone to the other extreme of, if you're not agreeing with XYZ thing I say, then you're not cool now. And you're like, this is ridiculous. But so yeah, I think you're right about complaining, and eventually you kind of, you have everything you want to have, and now you want everything for nothing, and that's where we're kind of to the point of, okay, you should knock it off now, kids. But anyway, just to switch gears here a little bit, I know it was very cool to see back to the Jordan Peterson thing. I know I'm imagining you've heard of his latest book, 12 Rules to Life, there, Duff.
Yeah, it's currently on my reading list. Right now I'm reading Michael Shermer's book, The History of Heavens, or sorry, Heavens on Earth. So I will be reading an atheist, and then I'll be reading a theist, but I look forward to both of them.
Oh, and just curious, what's the book you're reading about?
So Michael Shermer's latest book is a examination of ideas of heaven across different cultures and across different religions, and trying to address where this idea of a perfect place to go after you die comes from, and also tackling the idea that people will say, and if you look at the history, we know more about heaven, or at least we have more assumptions about heaven now than we did historically. But just because we have more assumptions about this particular place doesn't mean we actually have any more tangible evidence for its existence. So he's tracing the roots of how it can be seen as a useful thing for our species to consider paradise after death, but also some of the limitations that creep up when we look at different cultures producing ideas about heaven independently of one another, because it kind of weakens the argument that any one religion has saying that we have the one true way to the afterlife, because so many human groups over history have made exactly the same claims, and all they can really say is that they can describe their heaven more elaborately than they could previously, but they have no more evidence than anyone has ever had. So quite a neat read.
Interesting, gotcha. And have you already pre-ordered Mr. Peterson's book then?
Oh, I have it on my Kindle. As I said, it's right up after Michael Shermer's. So I'll probably start it
Oh,
Wednesday.
gotcha. Okay. That is no, it was fun to hear. I saw like I said, saw Ruben discussing Mr. Peterson's book, and he's obviously become quite the rock star in the conservative wing there overall, which is fascinating to see the hate that he gets constantly on Twitter and all the other social media sites and then whatever else there. But so I take it you agree with the statement that he very well. I don't know. I did kind of feel bad about the his interview with what's her face on the BBC, because it sounded as though it was like, oh well, either there was a video on, oh, she killed him, or like he did too much mansplaining and blah blah blah. And I mean, is that the? I'm hoping. Do you think people took that as a Jordan 1, or potentially maybe?
I think people will read it as their biases were already standing. But what I would like to point out is something a good friend of mine said was, if you look at it, Jordan actually has a really good ability to recall what he said. And Newman would always say, "You said this," and he would say, "No, I didn't say that." And at one point she goes, "Well, you're saying that women, because they are generally more compassionate and conscientious, are going to do less well than men in situations that require you to be a bit standoffish, right? A bit more aggressive."
Hmm.
And the irony of her going after that was, just prior to that, Jordan Peterson had been talking about his clinical practice. And he goes, actually, one of the things we can do is help women who are highly competent to work on their ability to negotiate well. In fact, I have done that successfully, and there are many women I know who have gotten raises. So here we have someone saying that biological determinism doesn't exist. This is Kathy Newman. Jordan Peterson turning around and saying, well, actually, it does. But the great thing about being human is we can work on our weaknesses and overcome the things which biology has given us. And then Kathy Newman turns around and goes, well, that's just basically racist, sexist, misogynist. And it's like, wait a second. He just said that if we identify problems, we can fix them. And you are of the opinion that there are no problems. Therefore, nothing can get fixed. So tell me, whose view is more constructive in the long run? The guy who's saying, yes, there are differences between sexes, between people, between cultures, but we can work on ourselves, or the woman who's saying we can't judge anybody and the shit that is in the world now will always be here and we can't deal with it? I would go with Jordan Peterson. He actually provides optimism.
Wow, I didn't even know. I remember the interview. I guess that I kind of glossed over that one part of it, but that's no, I agree. She definitely kind of said, well, this interview you said this, and he's like, I am very careful about how I word myself because of these reasons, and I know that you think this happened, but and then which was really annoying too, because she'd say, well, what about this? And he goes, well, don't you mean this? And he's like, no, and I mean, after a while, he couldn't get a word, and eventually they just ended with, well, I don't know if we all agree, but we'll just end there. It's like, okay, great. And I'm like, so you definitely realize you lost this battle. Like, it was not a a close fight over, well, don't you mean this? Well, no. Well, don't you mean this? Well, I didn't say, well, don't you mean? And then it was just a very, I guess, a obvious sign of who was in control at the time and everything else. But no, I just thought that that whole exchange was interesting, and more or less just because I don't see him on those networks very often as far as because I've seen him on obviously the Rubin Report and on Fox News and stuff. But I don't know, is he uh, as popular in the States as he is in Canada? Would you say, or maybe not?
Um,
Um,
our
our
political
political
uh, oh, getting some echo there, but so our news is generally very critical of Dr. Peterson, and is tends to go after him, but not for the substance of what he says, but rather by attacking a straw man of where his arguments could lead if they were in the hands of, let's say, the alt right. So there is a widespread popularity for him here in Canada, but if you watched our news, you wouldn't know it.
Interesting. Okay, that's fair. That's the and then it's kind of that's a bit of a segue I'm gonna ask you next. Like I said,
Mhm.
I watched him on the Rubin Report, and recently I've seen on Rubin Charlie Kirk and in an interview with him. There we go. And it was cool to see. Apparently I didn't know this, but Charlie Kirk didn't actually graduate college, and he's in he's the head of the Turning Point America and does a lot of college tours and talks on campus and stuff, and to see all the young people there to uh, see them kind of be more informed about politics kind of thing, which is really cool. But I guess and in the interview he talked about a lot of young kids saying, "Hey, I'm not really sure," or they kind of started out saying, "Hey, I'm a Bernie fan." Then he was able to talk to them, and they were slowly realize, "Hey, Bernie might mean well, but he's saying these things wrong and stuff," and to turn change their minds, and basically say, "Hey, I understand. It would be nice to say, free stuff, but this doesn't matter." And it's so it was very cool. He said it was very cool to see all the people kind of get educated well and have their opinions change. But I guess I don't know. Is there anything that you see in schools or on campuses wide that are a small change of kind of like that, kind of changing students' mind, or is it every kind of or the campuses in Canada more or less an echo chamber, if you will?
Um, no, that's tough to say because I haven't been on a university campus in at least
Oh,
a
sure.
year.
I mean, I don't know if the
Um,
university or school is different in that way, but
but what I would say is a bit of an issue right now is the wording used around ideas. So within, let's say, high school and elementary education, we have a great deal of discussion about trying to use different cultural lenses, trying to look at a lot more people's perspective on things, their systems of knowing, their religious systems of knowing, their mathematical systems of knowing, and stuff like this, which is all well and good on the surface. The major issue, though, is we're not encouraged to give kids a lens from which you can say this is better than that because we can measure it statistically or we can measure it in reality. And because we're not encouraging them to think critically about the shortfalls of different lenses, different religious worldviews, different ways of knowing, we're teaching kids to essentially put their fingers in their ears and go la 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 whenever someone tries to bring up an issue of substance, saying this particular group's perspective on the world is dated and also empowers, let's say, his family groups to have political authority in ways that a typical democracy wouldn't, or something like that. So we're kind of getting soft-souled critical theory or critical, let's say, critical cultural theory in a very broad strokes, very inclusive kind of way, which on the one hand, I think is cool. Looking at people's perspectives, looking at different ways of knowing is really good. Knowing more about the world is always better for you. The problem is that we're being told not to develop a critical tool from which to say, this might be cool, this might be a historical people's perspective on things, but it doesn't appear to work well today. Because that's hateful, bigoted, and misogynistic, and ultimately an expression of the patriarchy, right? Because you think you know what's best.
of course they always do that. That's true. And actually, and no, I think you're right about that's just the you as you said before. You must be offended to have new ideas, and you must always right. Knowing more is always better than not knowing. So we might as well learn more, change more, and that's how you become a better person and about yourself overall. And actually, to switch gears a little bit more, you just remind me of in the future of how things are going to be run with our leaders. Again, I don't know what you've seen or heard about this. There are a few polls going around talking about Mr. Sanders and a few other Democratic leaders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, um, Elizabeth Weinstein, and a lot of the people there. And again, if you don't know, that's totally fine. It's just curious, but there were a few polls showing how each would do versus Trump, and I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on who would come out on top between all those, I guess, celebrity Democratic candidates potentially?
Um, I don't really have enough knowledge to say accurately. The only thing which I can sort of give my opinion on is they would need to be able to do something radically different in terms of how they ran their campaign and not seek to emulate Hillary in how they're running themselves and how they sold themselves to the public. But I think a lot of Democrats still suffer from Clinton envy and really want to use the Clintons' playbook because they can't really use Obama's. You'll notice out of all those names that you said, I think only one of them is African American. Or
Yeah,
if
I don't
any.
remember who, but yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about but yeah, yes, only one thus far, and she gave a speech at the whatever awards to say how much she cares and stuff. So yeah, I think
Yeah. And that's the thing which is tricky for them because even she, I don't think, would be able to use the same type of language of being the change, right? And creating the new tomorrow because we've already had Barrack say that. I have a feeling she, like as I say, most of the other Democrats would probably try and go along more Hillary's lines because they'd be playing to their traditional strengths, which ironically are far more corporatist and far more elitist than they like to acknowledge. So they would be playing against Trump, probably starting more popular, but having no new defenses against his claims of fake news, the media being out to get me, because they still are. All of the things which held true prior to Trump's election about how he was being treated in the popular discourse hold true now. And so the only thing which Trump suffers from is maybe the most hardcore elements of his base are a little bit disappointed in the fact that he hasn't been able to make sweeping changes in his first year in office. But I think it was at Daily Wire did an analysis between him and Reagan, and it turns out that Trump is doing, on average, more than most Republican presidents in his first term in terms of policy.
yeah, that's true. That was one of the I think that was one of the questions overall for the last speech. Someone asked Ben Shapiro about Trump's presidential like how many promises he's kept and that kind of thing, and Ben basically just said, "Hey, guys, when it comes to policy and regulations, Trump actually done a really good job when it comes to defunding and kind of getting rid of some areas of the government. He's done a really good job there too. When it comes to his image and what he says, he sucks. So it sounds I was actually listening to the show today, and there was a video of Trump talking to reporters about immigration kind of deal, and Ben says, "Okay, Trump said a lot of things. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Here's what you got to remember: Trump says stuff. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. He's basically in the mindset of if you give him a bill and he thinks it'll make it popular, he'll sign it. He's not the uh, mastermind that he keeps saying that he is. He says a lot of things and it will get him press and he likes the attention. But when it comes down to the hardcore policy stuff, he luckily, as Mr. Shapiro has said, he's picked out several very good people to do their job. And as long as they do their job, his presidency works. Trump doesn't have to do much regarding, for example, Nikki Haley's done a great job with and of the U.S. That kind of thing. So as long as he has people there that know what they're doing, he doesn't have to do much and that kind of thing. So it's you know harder to hit him because overall it's just the allegations are getting so crazy. And actually, going down that road, have you heard anything about the? I can't remember the reporter's name, but someone had a report about how the Obama administration and the FBI saved Clinton from being indicted. Have you heard much about that news story?
Sorry, I didn't catch that they're AAA.
Oh no, I was just saying. Getting off of Trump saying things, did you hear anything about there's more quote unquote new developments on the Obama administration working with the FBI to make sure that Hillary Clinton did not get indicted. I didn't know if you heard about that.
Yeah, so this would be the thing about how the Justice Department and the FBI may have been colluding and intentionally feeding Comey things to say, and feeding who is the head of the was it the Senate or the Congress, where she had said, I hadn't heard anything about this before. And it turns out, no, she knew full well, and the FBI knew full well. So in the process of the investigation, it would appear that elements within the FBI were fully colluding with the Democratic Party and, in a sense, trying to create a narrative as they saw fit because they didn't want Trump to win. And so, yeah, no, I think I've heard something about that. What are your thoughts on it there, AAA?
I think that everyone needs to calm down. Well, firstly, just because I don't like when people get crazy about things yet, and it sounds as though, to be fair though, it sounds as though there is a lot of evidence saying that if the Obama administration sounds like made a lot of efforts to work with the FBI and make sure that Clinton did not get indicted or have anything against the law, because if she did, then there was direct evidence relating him to the same crime. So they were trying to make sure that they saved face with both people there. So I think that there is more evidence regarding their what do I call that? I guess their crimes than there is in anything involving Trump and Russia and systematically going, oh, well, I'm going to win the presidency this way. It sounds like Trump kind of just guesses a lot and gets some places and doesn't get other places. So him being the mastermind of trying to get votes with Russia sounds a little ridiculous. But I do think that, I mean, again, there's substantial evidence that shows and details with texts and other articles and things like that that Obama and Clinton did a lot of work together. And I mean, there are several people in the indictment team, or not indictment team, I'm sorry, the team inspecting Trump and Russia, people there, people in the FBI that have clear stances on being anti-Trump and pro-Obama and that kind of stuff. So it seems as though there's a lot of evidence suggesting that this is not, there's evidence there. It would be, I mean, hopefully something would happen, and this gives credence to the point of people saying, I don't trust the government, I don't trust the Democrats, I think that they're all out for their own opinion or their own gain kind of deal. And through this, I think that, they have some merit because it does look like there's a lot of, if we, can make sure he doesn't win this way, then here's our plan, XYZ and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's evidence to suggest that. But I guess then if there is all this corruption in the government, then I don't know what is the best way to get rid of it. And I mean, I was joking with some friends before too, and about the whole thing, and this, well, why don't you just fire everyone? And I'm like, honestly, I wouldn't hate that. I don't know if that's the answer, but I mean, I think that, first and foremost, I do believe that people in government should have much, much, much stricter guidelines. And because as we've seen this last year, it sounds as though there have been many issues involving, sexual discrepancies and just other illegal actions that government officials have taken. And if they're doing those things and can't be held to the same standards that they pass into law for us, then we've got a bigger issue there. But no, I don't. I mean, have you, given what you've heard, do you think that that the claims against Obama and Clinton hold up?
Pardon there, AAA?
Oh, I was just saying, I think that there is evidence supporting Obama and Clinton were working together to save face for each other. And I guess I was wondering, A, if you thought that the evidence was there, and B, how to resolve the issue of a corrupt, how do you clean house, if you will?
Well, I think this is one of those questions where we actually need to know what the standards are that the politicians and bureaucrats are being held to, with the knowledge that any group that is long-standing will find ways around the structure put in place to prevent them from doing questionable things with their authority and with their power. And so I don't know anything because, of course, the information hasn't been released other than that there seems to be communication between the FBI or people who are members of the FBI and political players that would be evidence of going outside of the purview of what they're supposed to do. Now, it's hard to say that the FBI should be completely neutral all the time because the FBI probably is. The individual agents and people who work for them, maybe not. As far as I know, both of the people who have been implicated, the fellow and his then alleged mistress and now wife, weren't field agents. They were lawyers, right? Who were working as part of the FBI, and they were in places where they had access to information and access to resources, which allowed them to actually deal within political spheres far higher than you would expect the average FBI agent to be able to deal with. So here it's more of a question of, do we know the type of people who are getting into these positions? And B, are there certain positions that are going to be more populated by people who are willing to use their power to ends which are not so great? And in an odd way, it's kind of a testament to the stringency of the United States' systems that we're hearing about this at all. Because the idea that the head of the national, let's say, security force, or even members of it aren't talking with political figures would be, just par for the course, or would be completely unthinkable in places like, let's say, Mexico, in places like Russia, where this type of communication happens all the time and it's just expected to be part of the process. So on the one hand, I think we have evidence that what structures the US has in place in terms of how people are supposed to act and the expectations of the average citizen are good, are robust, and do work. But at the same time, we have people who have been in their positions for so long that they understand how to skirt said restrictions and to their own benefit and perhaps to their own political gain. And neither of which is surprising. So what do you do about it? Well, you let investigations like the investigation going on now continue to be ongoing because we're finding out information about corruption, or at least people abusing their authority. And that's a good thing. So I'm not necessarily going to jump on the bandwagon of lots of changes need to be made, but rather, why weren't these types of investigations being undertaken under the Obama administration? And if the Obama administration was actively suppressing any type of investigation into the Democratic Party and expecting the FBI to follow suit with their political agendas beyond simply being like, keep America safe, then we have someone who is abusing the nature of their position. And that's a bad thing. So I think what's happening now is actually good. It's therapeutic, it's cathartic, and let's see where it goes.
That's true. So would you say that you think that this process is, how do I say, do you think that because of all the facts that we're learning, that the process of all the evidence is transparent enough, or maybe that is the solution, just have more transparency overall?
Well, I don't even know if it's more transparency, but rather just holding people to the standards which are there currently, and trying to identify and, let's say, raise awareness of the political parties that seem to be more willing to try and mold the parts of the government which are existing to their own designs. And how do we prevent them from doing that? So here's where, like, watchdog organizations really have failed. They weren't bringing this up because perhaps they were in the pockets of the previous administration. And, if we look back at the end of George Bush's term, leading into the Obama term, there were definitely overtures to try and rein in conservative political power, but nothing as controversial as what's coming out of the second term of Obama's administration. So, complicated problem, but there is evidence of failures of the checks and balances. But at the same time, when we have an investigation into what failures have happened, we still get information, and we have to appreciate that the process which is being undertaken is a good one. What we do with it in the future, or what Americans do with it in the future, is more important, I think, though. So is it a matter of, let's say, more transparency, as you're saying? Well, the thing is, what would more transparency look like, in your opinion, when you're talking about an organization that is supposed to be semi-secretive to begin with?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, I guess there was even, I don't know if you heard about that, there was a new report discussing, I don't remember if this was Pfizer or whatever that was even the name mentioned, but there was a new report talking about someone had a 4-page summary of information that they wanted to get out to the public, and they said that this was groundbreaking and would destroy any further investigation with Russia and kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think that uh, the I guess it's maybe what I mean to say is not necessarily, okay, by the way, the FBI should release information more to the public, but potentially just I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is, it sounds as though the entire team, or many people on the team to investigate Trump already had their opinions, and were already extreme enough to plan against him. So I guess maybe what I'm referring to is more of a closer to unbiased, or closer to, not as extreme thinkers in that team, to kind of, say, hey, here's a guy that I might not like, but we're gonna go and, people that are on the team, not outright going to say, I don't care what the facts are, here's how we're gonna play this game. So maybe, I guess that's where the standards and requirements for getting these law enforcement or government officials in the right mindset to say, we're gonna do our job first, because that
Well,
seems to be number one issue, if that makes sense.
well, I think what the underlying problem here is, when a special prosecutor is appointed, what is the process by which they vet their followers? So it might actually be a revelation of the weakness of the singular special prosecutor, when really what you should have is the Justice Department essentially saying, okay, we're going to appoint special prosecutors who work conjointly, and we're going to make sure that we're picking ones that come from opposite sides of the fence, so that they have to work together in order to research into the problem which they've been appointed to do. But we're not going to leave it in the power of one man or one woman, because we think that if in that case, if that person has a political bias which they're already acting upon, they're going to be selecting people who also reflect their bias, and therefore we will not get such an in-depth investigation as we would like, with, let's say, the intellectual honesty that we would like. So perhaps what we need to come out of this is that when special prosecutors are appointed, it's actually prosecutors, not just a singular.
That's true. That's true. I can see that coming. Well, I guess bottom line, we don't know things, unfortunately, and people who say that they do know the things are not lying, because no one knows the things to make decisions on further things. So we'll have to play it by ear for right now and just see what comes up of it. Which, no one likes to see. Hey, let's play the wait game, but that's the most accurate and best thing to do right now, because you can't make a decision on nothing overall anyway. But um, I don't know. I mean, and so I guess to end on a better note, I think that Trump is gonna be maybe not okay, but survive this whole thing. And I guess that's the nice thing about Trump, because no matter what media hits him, he just does not go down. And that's interesting to see how much crap he can take, and just nothing really bad happens to him overall. Duff, would you say that Trump's pretty, not bulletproof, but pretty media proof at this point overall?
um, Maybe. We'll see. He certainly knows how to play a game. I think what he needs to watch out for is that he doesn't assume that the game he knows how to play is the game that everyone's playing. So with his saying that he will go and speak under oath to Robert Mueller, I would say that's a bad idea. But if he can be talked out of that and not do anything stupid, as always, as Ben Shapiro says, if he can be convinced to put the Twitter away, he'll continue to do what he's doing, and he'll just be another president. Unpopular amongst the media, but overall fairly conservative, fairly good at getting what he wants put through. And that's all you can ask of the person in office, kind of thing, right?
A president that's Republican being crucified and being mocked by the media? No way. There's never any kind of president that would ever be mocked by the media for on the political part. That's just crazy. Yeah, I hope that no, I'm hoping that people just get tired. I mean, it's been a year of oh God, what did he do now? And oh, here's this new, thing with Trump having an affair with someone else, or something he said, or hey, he's racist. And I'm just kind of like, I'm hoping that eventually we all just kind of, and I don't know if maybe this has already been happening, but I'm looking forward to just I think more and more that the media keeps just hitting everyone's kind of like, you know what, I'm done. I'm just apathetic towards, all right, well, Trump said just cursed, literally cursed. We have video of Trump cursing at an illegal immigrant as they cross the border, and people are gonna go, okay, that's a cool story. That's awesome. I mean, again, I'm not sure if that's would be great for that to happen overall, but I feel like that's at the point where a lot of people that are watching the news are kind of just saying, you guys are really putting all your eggs in one basket, and I am done with the basket. I'm done with the eggs. I just want to get the omelet over with. Let's go and be free of this. But I don't know. Are you seeing? I guess finally, are you seeing the the end result of the media and the Democrats kind of overplaying their hand more or less now?
For now, at least until the next big issue, which they turned it into, because of course it was what Trump-Russia collusion. Now it's like, oh, now Trump is going to be found out or trapped by Mueller. So I think it's going to continue to roll along as it is, and I don't see any huge victories to be won. But I do see a good and necessary curtailing of the media's assumption that they actually know something about the world and that their particular narrative is the best one. And when it comes at the hands of the most powerful man in the world, all the better. So let's see what Trump does.
And that's fair enough. That's fair enough. That's good to hear. Well, I think that's gonna clear things up overall for the night. Any last words or thoughts there overall, Duff?
Everybody go out and pick up a copy of Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Defeating Chaos. Highly recommend. Haven't read it yet? We'll get back to you next week.
What a nice plug. I'm sure when he sees this video one of these days when we're both, in our 80s, he'll be, oh, well, thank goodness someone was there for me when I needed to have a podcast or overall. But I agree you should go buy Mr. Peterson's book. I'd also say that this is not, I'm not endorsing him, or I'm not being paid to say this, but I definitely think everyone should join the Daily Wire to see Mr. Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, all those shows there. And if you have a little extra money, go and sign up for CRTV with Michelle Malkin, Steven Crowder, and honestly, there's a lot of people. Like, it used to be.
Oh, you forgot one. Forgot one, AAA.
Who did I forget?
Latest CRTV pickup is Roaming Millennium.
Roaming? Right, but to be fair, there are. I guess my point was going to be they started with about 4, and now they have like 50 million. Like, there is a bevy of just like so many conservative people on Insert TV. I mean, for $60 or $90 a year for that, I mean, that's pretty solid deal for all the content you can get there. And it's not all. I mean, it is, yes, political stuff, but not all of it is. What's Trump doing and how's Russia feeling about that? What's the Democrat? I mean, there is that there, but I mean, there are also just kind of general life shows there. Michelle Malkin does things about crime within the states and stuff, and more specific investigations. I mean, it's called Michelle Malkin Investigates, but Crowder's more of a comedian than anything else going over there. But it's not just straight on. Ben Shapiro talks about good, bad Trump and all this. So definitely. Those shows, Ben Shapiro and CRT, definitely worth subscribing to. But anyway, done saying that, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. So goodbye, Duff. We're gonna be out of here.
All right, see y'all.
See you next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you.